So welcome everyone to another edition of SoCal Soaring Porch Chats. And this evening is the last in a series of the spring series for 2023. And I'm welcome and very happy and pleased to have Kempton Izuno join us this evening. I guess I'll start with just giving you the kind of the how we got here. So through the various platforms of soaring accomplishments and people posting their cross-country flights, I saw the amazing flights that Kempton was accomplishing and getting out there and doing, and also Rami, the two of them. Those guys put some pretty good miles on their gliders. I reached out to Rami saying, "Hey, would you think about coming on the Porch Chat?" And he said, "I think Kempton is a really good speaker. I think maybe you should talk to Kempton." So hemmed and hawed about that, but then I bumped into him at Reno Convention and actually saw his talk at the Reno Convention, and his talk was just spot on. I mean, I guess I'm a little particular about PowerPoints where people talk too much and there's 1,000 words on each page, and his presentation was just really great. So I approached him and I said, "Hey, let's talk." And he said, "Hey, let's go have some sushi." And so we went out and had some sushi, and I made sure he had plenty of sake before I twisted his arm. And so he said, "Yes, I'll be glad to do it." So with that said, Kempton, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, and thank you all for coming here. I know that I personally think these are really great, and a lot of what I give talks on are things that I'm personally interested in, just to be able to either encapsulate it or document it. So this is one of those topics. I see that Yuli's on and Norm's on. They are part of the NCSA up in Byron, California. I gave a talk there on one of their weekly sessions on more about how to approach soaring, and kind of like the line managing yourself came up through that. So this is actually an iteration on that. So anyway, that's what really got me going on this, because to me this touches on a lot of life issues, which at the very top of it is soaring in terms of when they come out. So let's jump right in. Yeah, well, they changed some of the features. Here we go. Okay. So really what I'm going to talk about is you have to know yourself in terms of managing your own stress. What are you doing for preparations? And then actually some tips and tricks when you're in the moment of doing this. A lot of this, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist or anything. I'm just, a soaring pilot, but I just wanted to share this with you because some of these things you're going to go, well, of course, Kempton, that's very obvious. But what I've noticed is in the pressure cooker of being on a long cross-country flight, and I've now flown with about 120 people, of which probably 100 are pilots, within the envelope of what I'm looking for, which is somebody who is soloed and they've got some kind of cross-country experience. Maybe it's only 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers, but now they have a basis and they have a signal, if you will, for me to then amplify that so that they can do, 300, 500, 700 kilometer flights. So that's what for me has been really what's driving me, to use my glider, an ASH 25, and have people in the front seat. But it's also extremely stressful. I mean, even when I'm doing most of the flying, I tell the pilots, I'm the pilot in command. I tell the co-pilots, I'm the pilot in command. You don't have to worry about landing, takeoff, low saves, landing out, any of that. All I want you to do is concentrate on the managing the lift and clouds and air, right? So that way we make it fairly pure. And, of course, we only go up on days with reasonable lift. So, and I've noticed, there's a lot, almost all of them are guys, I'd say 95% of them are males. And there's been this whole range of different types of people there. And the bottom line to me is if you don't know yourself, on one extreme, you'll be somebody that says, "Oh, well, I've taken up lots of people before. I know how this goes." And that the guy who said that actually, so I call him, he was on the far side of the spectrum. He said he'd done this a lot with paragliders. He threw up so many times in the plane that I ran out of bags. And
Oh,
then, he passed out. But it was such a good day that I kept on going to the Oregon border, and I could hear the EDS unit, and I could hear it puffing. He wasn't dead. It was fine. It was a good soaring day. I'm not going to throw away a good soaring day. And he's out for like 2.5 hours. And then finally he wakes up on final glide and he says, "Can I fly it?" I said, "Sure." So that was an extreme example. Most everyone else is very receptive, and they're very accommodating and thoughtful, and try to take this in. So anyway, that's just the basis of where I'm coming from for sharing what I'm going to share with you here. So quick definition. My definition of a soaring stress is something that's usually under 30 minutes. And the reason I put it that way is that, most all of the time, a soaring stressor is a low save. Now, there's a few other exceptions, like getting caught on top or getting sucked into a thunderstorm. Okay, but when you think about what is the most common soaring stress point, it's landing out, or it's trying to prevent a land out. It's a low save, and so that only spans like 5 minutes, 15 minutes. It's usually under 30 minutes. I make that distinction because there are lots of other stressors in life, like you're in a bad relationship, or you're under financial hardships, or you got a health issue or whatnot. And of course, that can go for months and years. Okay. And that has different issues. Well, I'm not trying to solve that problem here. It's just talking about soaring stressors. Okay. Okay. So let's go into the first part of this. You have to know yourself. And what do I mean by that? I mean, to me, an iceberg is a good manifestation, a good visual for that, because a lot of what the ordinary person sees, or what you even see of yourself, is not what is apparent. And then that feeds into what's your resiliency. Because if you are weaker or stronger, and I don't mean weakness in a bad way, it's just, we all have our weaknesses, name all the usuals. But it's important to know that, because if you are self-aware enough, when you're getting close to the edge on one of these things, and then you can say, you're saying to yourself, I got to do something to back away from this edge, because I can feel I'm getting more tense. Okay. So for those of you who haven't really thought about this is the way I think about it. So, I'm not into any religion. I'm not into, Buddha or, anything like that. But what I'm going to share here is my own personal observations of what I've seen in life. To me, if you want to have a good, healthy, sustainable, balanced life, you have to have the good social quality. You have your spouse and your children and your friends. I bring this up partially because I'm very aware of that myself, and a lot of people have talked about this during COVID. But I also see in the soaring community, it's mostly single guys. I mean, maybe I would, no statistics, I'd say probably half, maybe a third to half the people in soaring are single males who are, let's be blunt, they're more at risk for suicide or depression. If you have a robust family, I'm married, been married for 31 years, have kids who are healthy, and, got a robust set of friends and all, that really helps you have resiliency to be able to last through, bad times, not only if you have a bad soaring event, but within soaring or anything else in that area. Then there's what I call your spirit. That is your mental, energy, mental health, but it's also your physical health, because the two are combined there. And actually, I'll talk about that when I talk about one of the ways to be able to handle things. If you don't take care of those, and that can be everything from, keeping yourself in physical shape, because the physical does support the mental. There's something in Western society where it was more like, well, you can overcome anything if you concentrate on it hard enough. Well, that's true to some degree, but if you don't have the physical energy, and, we were talking at the very beginning about joint pains, and back pains and all that stuff. I think everyone on this call is not under 30. And if you are, you're lucky. But even my son, he's 23, he's already got some back issues from some incidents he's had earlier. So the point is that, you have to take care of that. At the beginning of COVID, I said to myself, mental health is going to be important because we're all so isolated. And then finally, it's what I call your asset quality and depth, your money and career. And you're thinking, well, that sounds pretty damn Western, Kempton. Well, it is. I mean, if you don't have the assets to be able to take the time to go soaring and you're just scraping on the edge all the time, that's going to cause stress, and there are plenty of people I've noticed, they think they can save their way to prosperity. You can't save your way to prosperity. You have to figure out a way to make more money so that you can afford a glider to have the independence to do that. I remember when I had the ASH 26E, at the time I decided to sell it, was 2007. The dollar had become very weak, and so it was like, valued at like $175,000. I'm going, God, that's a lot of money to be tied up. For some of you, it may not be. For me, it was a lot of money to be tied up in one hunk of fiberglass and carbon. So that was also helpful in selling it. So my point is that if you have a balance between three of these areas, if you feel you're strong in all three of these areas, then that is a really good basis for growth and handling the stress in soaring. That's and life in general too. Okay, so that all feeds into resiliency. Okay, so what is resiliency? Resiliency is the ability to take as they say in the medical business, an insult, or, for the rest of us, take an impact. Can you take a financial hit? Can you take a, physical hit? Can you take a relationship hit? My son's not in the room here right now, but his girlfriend just broke up with him. It was his first serious girlfriend. It broke up with him, and he has been hit hard. And so and I get that. I think all of us here, I think it's all males on the call, you've seen some form of that, either for yourself or for ones that you care about. And coming back from that and making that something that, you'll never forget that, and it'll be painful, but to not have that, turn into depression or suicide or any of those other things, is important. So, you're probably thinking, well, Kempton, this is all obvious stuff. Well, it might be obvious on the surface, but what I have found with other pilots is that the more those pilots brag about themselves or talk too confidently or strut too much, the more they've got some crap underneath the surface. And I know a couple of them who've been killed, or a couple of them who had a crash and then left the sport. So, basically it's kind of managing yourself, staying a little humble. So just for background, I'm just going to share with you some of my events in my personal life. Again, this is not to brag or anything, because some of these, are a little emotional for me, but just so you know where I'm coming from. I've had three major glider incidents. I landed, if you will, my labelle in a vineyard. I am lucky I didn't die in that. I could have easily, died in that. I had a heart incident in 1998 where I had to have the paramedics come, and I was in a coma for 13 or 14 hours after that, lost short-term memory. I'm perfectly fine now, no stents and all, but I came very close to dying. My wife resuscitated me. I've made a few million and I've lost a few million. When I lost those few million, my wife should have divorced me, but she didn't. Our first child, our daughter, we had to go through infertility with her. And when she was born, we knew something was wrong. And by the time we got to the ER and she had a C-section to get her out, the doctor said later, if it hadn't been another 60 to 90 seconds, she probably would have brain damage. I mean, she's perfectly fine now. But at that time, it was so close, the umbilical cord was tearing and there was internal blood loss, all that kind of stuff. And then I was sucked into a thunderstorm, in gliding. So as Carl Streetick said, after all that stuff, I have used up all the good luck in my life. So you better be damn careful, because I'm still perfectly healthy. My wife is still with me. I'm reasonably okay financially, and I'm still flying. So, you don't have to tell me, but tell yourself, you measure that. There's a lot of families, for example, that they have never taken their children or anyone to the ER. In my family, we've been to the ER. Everyone in the family, including the dog, has been to the ER multiple times. So we know the drill. It doesn't make it any easier, and you're tense each time. But the point is that, all of these things, my wife and I know the drill. Okay, we got to do this, this, and this, because we've seen so much CRIP in our lives. The only thing that could be worse than this is if you are in the battlefield or one of your children's die. I've had my niece die. I mean, the point is that we all have this stuff underneath the surface, and this affects us for how we can handle our soaring. Okay. The last point I'll make on this is I heard this someplace, you earn, the original phrase was you earn your risk, meaning that as you build up your ability to handle riskier and riskier situations, that allows you to do more, right? I mean, sounds makes sense. Children do this all the time, right? They just walk around, and then you start bicycling, and then your interactions with people. It's not just physical things, right? It's some people are scared to death to give presentations. Some people are scared to death to introduce themselves to other people. But as you do it more, you get more comfortable with it. You get your skill set up and all. Trading, glider flying, motorcycles, whatever. The important thing is you keep at it and you're incrementally growing, so some people do it on their own in soaring. Others, they do some dual cross country, whatever, but you actually have to do it. The books, Reichman and G. Dale, those are all great books. Nothing wrong with that. But I find a lot of people, and I used to be like this too. So I'm thinking, well, if I read about it and I do it, or if I read about it enough, that's enough. No, that's not. So again, these are all pretty obvious things, I think, to most of us, but I just go through it again so that you know that this is kind of like a checklist, if you will, to just inspect yourself and say, well, yeah, I do this, but I don't do that. So I hope all that made sense. Chris, are there any questions? I see two things in chat here.
Oh, just me, just putting some stuff there.
And anyone, just pipe up at any time, because I do these things all the time. I still work in high tech. I am the oldest guy in my company by far. If you take the 5 oldest guys out, the average age of my company is probably 28. So they're used to chatting and all that stuff. I like to just have a conversation, probably like most of us here. All right, so let's go on to the next section, preparation. Let's define that. Let's talk about, key tasks and all, and then the all-important landing out. So I define this as preparation is tasks that you do in advance to eliminate or reduce the stressors. Now you're thinking, Jesus, Kempton, that's obvious. Well, I've noticed that when people are around me as I'm getting ready to fly, they almost always make comments, the ones who don't really know me, like, God, you're doing a lot of stuff, Yes, I'm laying out my, my flight suit, I'm checking that the batteries are on charge. And unfortunately at Williams, and there's a large interior area, and I just take over, a whole table to lay my stuff out, and, everything from the food and the drinks and the, the hat, and I mean, everything you can do in advance to eliminate, reduce stressors. And what that really means is that you not only have checked if the thing that is on your list is there, but you're also saving time. I never seem to have enough time to get ready for a flight, especially a long, big one. So anything I can do to reduce, to expand my available time is very helpful. Okay, so let's just go through the list. This is not an exhaustive list. I'm just throwing some of these things up here just for you all to be able to, again, think about this. And by the way, I'll make these slides available as a PDF. So Chris, right, you can share it with everyone.
Super.
So practice, again, sounds obvious. Mitch Polinsky, who now flies an EB out in Central Nevada and it sets a lot of records. When he had a DG 400, he, like a lot of people who have approached me and asked, well, what should I get? Should I get this glider or that computer and all that? And I stopped him. I said, stop. You just have to fly more, because all of that stuff, whether you have a standard Cirrus or a ASH 30, it doesn't do you any good if you don't build up your skill set. I flew with a guy a couple of weeks ago. He has this beautiful ASG 32, the 20-meter Schleicher. And we're flying around in the wave, and we're coming back. First time I flew with him in his 32, and we're flying back, and he's had this ship for at least 2 years. And as we're coming back to the airport, he goes, do you always fly at 90 knots? I go, no. He says, this ship has never been over 90 knots. I go, you've got it. Okay, I get that. You're being very cautious and all, but that's not, you're not paying, your hundreds of thousands of dollars to fly at best glide with this thing. You got to be using the high speed end of it. You didn't know that. It's okay. But you got to practice these things and get used to what you need to do and press, when you need to press and pull back when you need to pull back. I talked about maximizing prep time, arrive early. Because of my ship is so complicated and heavy, I arrive the day before, I lay out my clothes and all my stuff, and I intend to make time to socialize and say, okay, I'm going to get ready so that we have time to go to dinner, because that way you can, have a reward for yourself for getting ready, and you're not just rushing around. My mom likes to say, rushing causes violence. And unfortunately, I agree with that. Your internal physical. What do I mean by that? I like spicy foods, man. My daughter grows habaneros, not a good thing to have right before the flight. Your P&P system, especially because I do wave cross country. I actually have an extra bag because our P system, normally you dump it overboard, but there have been a couple of cases where it freezes, and obviously you still need the pee. So I actually have one of those medical bags, with the one-way valve, in case I got to use that because my pee tube is frozen. You got to poop. This is most critical. I make sure, because I'm in there with the co-pilot, I'm very explicit. No subject goes untouched by me. I said, did you poop? Was it a good one? Good. Okay, now we can go. Because that is so, there were a few things other than a full bladder can be really distracting for the flight. Got to get enough sleep. If you got to take one of those medical pills to do that the night before, great. Or go to bed early, take a shower, whatever. No, I talked about rushing, no rushing there. Hydrate before and in flight, not just when you're in, up there, but you got to do it beforehand because, it could be really hot on the ground before you launch, and especially on some of these special days. I can't stand being hot. That just, I do everything to really avoid that. If you need your pain meds, carry them. Carl Streetick suggested bringing earplugs, because if all of a sudden this whistle starts happening while you're up there and you're going to be up there for another 6 hours, that's going to be a real drag. You need to have something to remind you to drink. One of my co-pilots on a previous flight, he started acting a little slow on things, and he's a many thousands of hour instructor. And he said when he got back on the ground, he goes, I hardly drank anything. I said, I'm happy to remind you, because I, or at least, I'm drinking pretty regularly. External physical. What do I mean by this? I mean, things around you, like cockpit, leaks, which is really, of course, bad on cold days. But the flip side of that is making sure your vents do get you most of the air, for the hot days. Cooling. I mentioned I try not to use the word hate, but I really hate being hot. And so I have these vests with ice packs in them. I put a towel around my neck. I allocate some of the water in the cockpit to put on the towel. It's not all drinking water in the cockpit, along with my Gatorade type of stuff. And you also have to keep yourself cool a couple hours before launch. I know sometimes, on these 100+ degree days, that's tough, but it's been proven by studies that you get stupid if you get hot. And I've seen that in myself, and your resiliency is down, your stamina is down, everything. Heat is no good for anyone except the thermals. And then your checklist. We talked about this at the very beginning. You have a checklist, and of course the joke is, you have to, the first thing on your checklist is actually find the checklist, then look at the checklist and actually do what's on the checklist. Okay. Again, it sounds all elementary, but it's getting those basics down, to prevent that one thing. And you got your laundry list, and I've got a whole list. The one thing that you get wrong might seem small, but it will bite you later. And I got lots of those stories, unfortunately. And I'll just tell one here, which is in 2006, I was at Truckee in June, and I could see a 2,000 kilometer wave day coming. No one had flown a 2,000 kilometer wave day up to that point. I was in my ASX 26E. I took off. No one helped me take off, which would be helpful to have somebody around you to help you take off. About 45 minutes into the flight, I realized I left my drinks on the ground, and this was going to be an 11-hour flight. I blame the drinks for my poor decision after the first 1,000-kilometer leg for
Oh,
the point. And so I had to start the engine and it nixed the flight. I could have had the first 2,000-kilometer flight in the States, but I didn't. And that I don't have many soaring regrets, but that's one of them. Most importantly, your expectations. If you think you're going to go out, and jump from a 50-kilometer flight to a 300-kilometer flight in one day, that's a little bit much. And so you just kind of, work your way up. I know it sounds like, yeah, it's important to balance those, ambitions against, what your capabilities are. But you have to be realistic about this, because if you're not, then you're going to put yourself into some corners that will be very difficult to get out of. The number one thing is you have to come to peace with landing out. My glider, this is from my landing at Fox Field, and the guy in the blue there is Walt Rogers. This is after my attempt on trying to do a 1,200-kilometer straight out flight. And we were so disappointed that the Tehachapi wave wasn't working. So we wound up landing at Fox Field. But I was okay with that. And you have to become okay. I mean, you have to really become okay with that. And what do I mean by that is, you have to be able to say, obviously, we were all disappointed with ourselves when we have to land out, but it happens. And if you're at peace with that, then you're going to be much less tense when you're down low scraping around, and there've been plenty of times I've done that and it doesn't work. I think the longest I've ever scraped around before giving into a landing was probably like 80 minutes, almost an hour and a half, when I was about 120 miles away from Williams. I landed at Weaverville, and I was just scraping and scraping and scraping, and I just couldn't get out of there. So it's a drag, but it's not the end of the world. And it's just important that you come to peace with that, because otherwise the tension in yourself and the stress will be so high that you won't be able to function properly, when you're trying to find that lift, which precedes, possibly landing out.
Say, Kempton, on that flight, he actually came off the Tehachapis and the wave wasn't working. And I was watching him the whole day from my office and in my home in West Palmdale. And then I realized he's practically over my house. So I got in the car and I hooked up my VHF radio, and we actually had the talk. And he goes, well, you just came through where the wave should have been, and it wasn't, and you tried everything. And, they're obviously going, are you going to abort the flight? That was the talk. And we tried it on the radio. And I think it became very obvious, there's no point in going downwind into the blowing dust and hoping. We actually talked about that. Are we going to hope? Are you going to hope for better? And it made it easier. I think it made it easier for you and for everybody around to just go, well, here we are. Let's make the best of it.
Exactly. And to me, it's actually helpful to me to, back to the social part of this, is that when I have somebody else in the cockpit, a person with reasonable experience, not necessarily a newbie. Michael DeMeyer was in the front seat. He's got a DG300, and I think he has his gold badge. And, we were, circling around, in this 35 knot wind aloft going, and then talking to Walt, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, we got to do this. And I actually had looked at Fox Field ahead of time with a satellite picture, thinking, okay, if it is blowing so hard, this view right now is looking to the northeast, and you can see the windsock there, left center. If it is blowing so hard that I can't even land on the main runway, is there a way I can engineer landing, like on a taxiway connector to the runway? And so actually Fox Field was one of the key possible land out sites. And so you can do the same thing too, wherever you fly from, Byron or the Mojave Desert area, take a look at some of the airports that you say, what, this is one that I would land at because, I can fit, there's people there, it's got infrastructure. I have learned after landing out enough that I really want to land at a place with infrastructure. What do I mean by that? A paved runway, preferably some people there, something like that. That is important to be able to have that, because if you land in a dusty field, with no clear road access, yeah, you might be in one piece and the glider might be in one piece, but it could be a bit of a stressor, especially when it's blowing 30 miles an hour on the ground, to actually try to get a completed recovery.
Yeah, Kempton, and one more thing. If you would have decided to turn downwind and ended in that terrible scenario, it would have been a tremendous stressor for every other flight in the future you would make in that ship. So let's make the best of it and let's have a great time.
Exactly, because I would have this, which goes back to the, the resiliency. It's been pointed out every aircraft will flutter and disintegrate if you push it hard enough. And every human will disintegrate and have PTSD if you push a human far enough, right? So in some ways in life, it's about avoiding those super severe cases, because that will alter you, physically and mentally. So
Captain, I have a quick, probably kind of obvious, maybe silly question, because anybody who knows who flies cross country, that you want to see and know where your land outs are before you have to land out. But in doing a long cross country of this and the types that you do, it would seem impossible to do the boots on the ground for each land out. But how do you judge which ones are your preferred land outs? I'm sorry, this is not quite about.
No, this is very important, because this is the number one stressor, right? Is landing out. So right. People ask me with my glider, they go, God, how do you pick out fields for that? Because it's so big. I said, actually, it's very easy. My threshold I fly out of Williams, so I get to run up and down the Mendocino Range. And so that parallels I-5. There are all kinds of municipal airports along I-5, Willows, Corning, Orland, Red Bluff. I really avoid anything that is not a municipal airport or higher, because this ship is so heavy and the weight on that wheel is so heavy, and to be able to take it apart, if you take it apart in a harvested rice field, we might survive the landing, but the clods of dirt are so big that you might twist your ankle or drop a wing. So actually, it's not that I have lots of places to land. I personally say I am only landing at paved runways.
Right.
So which then is actually easier, because basically whatever is on a sectional that is, I do look at them, and I need to get ForeFlight. That is one of my to-dos that I didn't do for this flight, is to get ForeFlight on my iPhone, so that I can say, what's the width of that runway? Does what kind of lights does it have? That kind of thing.
Right.
So good question.
Good.
So okay, now we're to the root of this talk, actual tips and tricks for managing yourself. If you think about yourself as a flight envelope, replace that citation with yourself, and the axes, it could be whatever axes you have. And to me, what defines the envelope, it's not just two factors. It's not just load factor and speed. It's, again, how mentally resilient you are. Did you have enough rest? Are you too hot? Did you not keep yourself cool? Are you pushing yourself into an area that you don't really have experience in, like, maybe wave cross country with a lot of undercast, things like that. You have to know yourself well enough to be able to know when you're starting to get close to the edge. You look at a lot of young children, they don't know where the edge is, and they go running into things, or they fall off a curb or whatnot. My friend Gordon Betker, you probably know him because he's got the Jet Arcust, and he flies out of Minden, and he does great straight out flights. I was talking to him a long time ago after my cloud flight, and he said he's an MD-11 pilot and actually a 777 pilot now, for FedEx. And we talked about, artificial horizon devices and all. And we were saying, the problem is a lot of glider pilots, they put that instrument in, but they actually have never practiced with it in a true IMC situation. And Gordon said, even when you start thinking about turning it on, you're already in trouble. I'll remember that. If I'm even thinking about turning it on, now you're getting close to an edge. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So one of my favorite lines, I like to say, I learned so much about life from Dirty Harry movies and Star Trek and Lion King, and this is the famous scene from Dirty Harry, when the commissioner says, Callahan, you'll pay for this, and the car blows up and he says, a man's got to know his limitations. Okay, so let's talk about actually specific tactics here. What can you do to manage yourself in the moment? So first off, slow down. You got to buy yourself time. Somebody pointed out, I personally love reading aircraft accident reports. When I was in Australia, like 20 years ago, there were these 2-bound volumes, super detailed, of all these airline accidents. And I just read that whole thing. It was really amazing. And it is amazing, if anyone here reads aircraft accidents, no matter gliders or whatever, it is amazing the number of things that can come together to bite you. So, but if you can buy yourself time, because you're human like the rest of us, you can think, okay, all right, what can I do here? Almost nothing requires you to act in 5 seconds, in soaring, to save yourself. I mean, there's a couple things, but mostly, you usually have a few minutes to think about things. And more importantly, you need to know when you're getting to that point, right? So that's part of, cross country, people talk about the band, the cruise band. When you start getting to the lower part of that band, you better start slowing down and think about, okay, how much time do I have? You have to mechanically relax. Again, in Western society, we talk about how people say, well, just, you can control your mind, you can relax. Well, having raised 2 children, especially, and one of them who needed extra work, it's actually the reverse. If you mechanically do certain things to yourself, it could be everything from taking a deep breath to, I learned this from a therapist for my son. If you're starting to feel like sleepy in the plane and you're getting enough oxygen, tap your face like this. It'll wake you up, because the nerves on your face are so close to your brain, right? It's the same thing, like if I'm walking around in the morning, I'm getting ready to make the coffee. I just woke up and then I stub my foot. Oh, it pisses me off, but man, I'm awake, So I'm not saying that you have to cut yourself in the plane, but the point is you get something to wake you up if you're feeling drowsy. And to relax, you take some deep breaths, look around. Take a deep breath, take it through your nose, because those of you who have EDS systems, if you breathe through your mouth, it keeps beeping at you. So take 3 deep breaths through your nose. Okay. Now say the next 2 tasks out loud. So, okay, I'm getting on a ridge. I'm going to go left, but then, for about 60 seconds or so to see if there's some lift coming up that side, but the land out fields are to the right. Okay. When you say something out loud, you actually have to get your shit together to be able to form a complete sentence. And so you're going to say something, and that will help you not only articulate what your plan is, but also to be able to hold yourself accountable. When I'm in a 2-seater, the other person, I've had plenty of co-pilots saying, why are we doing this? Or what's the plan? Which is good, because I can do silly things too, just like the next person. So when you say these tasks out loud, it's a way to solidify what your plan is. You also have to forget the past, even if it was just 10 seconds ago or a minute or 2 ago, and you couldn't center that gust. And it's like the 4th gust you couldn't center. Oh, God. And now you're starting to get frustrated. We have all been there. So you just have to forget it and keep executing on your plan. Okay, I'm going to try there. I'm going to try here. I'm keeping the feel within glide. Don't dwell on the past. And unfortunately, I have an example of this when I was flying with a very well-known competition pilot, and we missed a thermal, and he got so mad. He's cursing and he's hitting the sides of the ship and kicking the rudder pedals. I said, man, you got to relax. Okay. If you're that type of person, you don't have to answer that. If you are or not, you have to, relax, forget the past. It benefits nobody. I think what was that? People often in depression are living in the past. If you're living in the present, if you're worrying about the future, there's also, you're incurring overhead for something that hasn't happened yet. Right. So the goal is to maximize your search area because you want to be able to maximize your chances to hit some lift. Okay, so here's an example. This is actually from a flight from with Mark Sudemeyer. He is a budding cross-country pilot out of Williams. He's retired. He's in his mid-60s, and he's flying ASW 24 rental. But he looked like good material, so we went up to Trinity Alps and back, about a 250-mile flight. But it's still early in the spring, and those clouds aren't very high up there. They're only like 9,500 feet or so, and the mountain right in front of us there is Yola Peak, which is 8,000. So there isn't a lot of room between the mountain and those clouds. So we had gone into this area. I've been through this area maybe not hundreds of times, but a lot, so that I know pretty much how this works in here. But of course, each time is slightly different. We had this picture was taken after we made a climb, but that yellow line, I was approaching that probably at about that height of the ridge from the south, which is behind us in this picture. And about where the middle of that yellow line is, you can see there's like a little, spur coming off the main ridge towards us. Usually that works. It didn't work this time. So then I go to the left, and I was explaining to Mark, okay, we're going to go to the left, even though the Central Valley and all those landable airports are to the right, because we had enough altitude. And I said, we're going to go left for about, a mile and a half or so, 2 miles. I actually like to talk in terms of time, because in a glider, right, you're fluctuating your speed a lot. You could be 120 knots, you can be at 50 knots. So I usually talk to my co-pilots and myself by saying, okay, we're going to go in this direction for another 60 seconds or 30 seconds or 90 seconds or whatever. And that way I say out loud what the plan is. We're going to go this way. We're going to be along the sun side of this ridge for about 60 seconds. If it doesn't work, then we turn around. The reason I'm going away from the landing out spots is because we're going to have to come back across that ridge anyway, because to head towards, where the fields are. So instead of going straight to where the landing fields are, so long as you have some altitude, go in the opposite direction to maximize your search. And in this case, it was along that ridge where the yellow line is. It continues off to the left. So I'll pause there. Does that make sense to everybody? It seems counterintuitive. It's not binary that you always just run for the landing field, right? You're trying to maximize your search area.
Kempton, there's one thing that the gentleman I've been flying with in our Grove 103 was talking and showing me how he would do kind of a little bit of an S, like a slow S, to try to maximize bumping into thermals. Is that anything similar to what you're saying?
Yeah, and in my case, I'm using a geographic feature. If you're on flat land, then yes, you'd be looking more at the ground, going, okay, where's the forest, where's the pond, where's the open field, where's the harvested field, that kind of thing. I don't have as much experience with that because I'm usually not flying in the flatlands. I mean, out west, almost always, some kind of topographic feature.
Right.
Okay. So when you're doing this maximizing of the search area, you have to have the bingo altitude. It's kind of like, okay, what is the altitude when I have to say, okay, I give up the search and we're heading, away from here. In this case, in the Yola Bola Wilderness area, as soon as you go maybe another few hundred yards to the right of the right end of that yellow line, it rapidly drops off down to the Central Valley. So it's kind of like, well, if it's going to work, it's got to be up here, because as soon as we go off this ridge, now we're out in the flats pretty much. So what's my bingo altitude? The bingo altitude was the altitude to reach either Rancho Tehama or Corning. Those are my two airport targets, on this flight at this moment. Okay. So visually, that bingo altitude was about 800, 900 feet below that yellow ridge line mark. Okay, so now you're in the mountains and they're above you. Now I'm going to go off on a tangent for a moment. If you've ever heard some of my other talks, I highly recommend, if you don't have mountain training experience for scraping off the ridge, you need to get that, especially in the West. So you go to the CNVV in southern France in Saint-Aubin. That's where they teach it. That's where I went. I had 3.5 weeks there. You don't have to have 3.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I was there for a 2-week stint and then another 4-day stint. Oh my God, they just grind you along those ridges, either in a 2-seater or you're lead and follow another glider. It is the biggest step function increase in my skill set I've ever had in my soaring, because now I feel very comfortable scraping on these ridges, but it's not something we teach in this country. Anyway, back to the topic. So does that make sense for everyone?
Sounds good so far.
Okay. Then actually managing yourself. I talked about talking out loud. What's your plan? Not only what the plan is, but also it's important to be able, for me, I work in tech. I have found that if I talk to Wi-Fi units and printers like they're a dog, they tend to behave better. And really, what that really is, of course, is you're setting your own expectations. You're bringing a little humor into it. But I found that I've started to do that, when I'm in lift. And so this is actually from a flight earlier this year. My co-pilot David Maruzzi was filming this. We found some lift in this reverse wave on the Western Sierras when the wind is from the east. And I was exploring that wave. No one had ever flown that wave before, and it works and it's great. And so, but we're not quite sure how it works, because there's no Lennies and, no one had ever done this before. So he captured this when I was circling in this lift.
Look at that! They're doing nothing. You can do it. You're such a good dog.
So he said, Kempton, you were talking to it like it's a dog. I go, yeah, I do that. I do that, don't I? So that's just something that I find is it's just so very helpful for managing yourself. We're gonna back here. The other thing I found, and it's happened on the flight, the one with the yellow line there with Mark Sudemeyer a couple weeks ago. I get low, I get frustrated like everybody else. And so I start saying the F word, kind of, what the fuck's going on here? There have been studies that show that in a high stress situation, if you say the F word, it actually relieves stress. Now, I am not saying that you do that amongst a bunch of people or your family or your kids, but in the solitary cockpit, you can do whatever you want and no one's ever going to know. But I thought it was interesting. So, for you, when you're low and you're grinding around, it's okay to say that. It'll actually be somewhat beneficial. Some of you, it doesn't do anything for you. For me, it's just kind of like, okay, you get frustrated. It's okay. So that is. Here we go. So everything I've just talked about here, it's not an exhaustive list, but to me, the key thing is you got to, come to peace with landing out. This is a picture from when I was flying with Star Simpson, and it was a post-frontal day in June. It was a great day. We went out to the coast from Williams, and we're coming back, and there was this really black thunderstorm between, just on the west side of Williams, and it was actually coming over Williams. And so Peter Dean, who had been a former U.S. Team pilot to international competition, he was ahead of us, and and we're looking at this cloud, this really black thunderstorm with lightning, going, wow, we might want to wait, and Peter announces that he's headed back, and he's got like a 4,000-foot altitude cushion. So after thinking about it for a minute or two, I think, I'm thinking, if Peter does it, we can do it. Well, we go in there and we had like a 3,500-foot altitude cushion over a conservative glide, and that was gone. And so now we are just going to barely make it over the town of Williams. And I said, no, we're not going to do this. And so you're looking at the Jones Strip, which is on the west side of Williams. You can see the runway is wet there. We actually landed in the rain and just sat there for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes to let the rain go by. And it was a complete non-event. It was not crop duster season. For those of you in the Northern California area, you really have to watch which strips you pick during crop duster season, because that's when they make their money. And if you block their runways while they're having to go in and out, that is really bad for crop duster relations. So, but it's okay. You land it out. and it's a good field seat. Meets my quality of a paved municipal strip type of airport or better. So the last point I'll make, which has absolutely nothing to do with managing your stress, is if you're not a member of the Cloud Appreciation Society, you should consider it. At first, when I first heard about this, I thought, this sounds so silly. But the Cloud Appreciation Society, cloudappreciationsociety.org, was founded by this guy, Gavin, and in the UK, and they're up to like 65,000 members. And that's 65,000 members paying about $30 a year to get the cloud of the day in their email, which I gotta admit, it's pretty nice. And then you get this little, other tchotchkes and things like that. But that's a friggin' $2 million business. I'm going, shit, how come I didn't do something like that, when I was thinking about it. Anyway, I was a safety pilot at the April 2018 Wave Camp, and he was the guest speaker. And in fact, I helped him get an Airbnb. And I'm thinking, well, surely he has been up in an airplane and next to a cloud. He had never been in an airplane next to a cloud. I said, that's a crime. Here you are founding this group in your business, and you've never even been next to a cloud. So I took him up. We actually went next to a Lenny, in the Wave. So that's my shameless little plug for the Cloud Appreciation Society. I get no compensation for it, but I think it's just really cool. Everyone, I'm a member, $32 a year, $30 a year, whatever it is. But it's fun to get your cloud a day. And there's some beautiful clouds in there, which teach you about, some about reading clouds and lift and all. So
Cool.
Anyway, so that was it. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts?
Yeah, please chime in. Anybody's thoughts, ideas, questions? I'll just say that saying your next two tasks out loud, I was taking notes along the way, and I grabbed my highlighter to write down those words and highlight that. It's part of, I forgot the right wording for a type of kind of, I don't call it psychobabble, but it's a way to reinforce your positive thoughts and to hear it. It's just like writing something down. Like if you're going to remember something better if you write it down. If you say it out loud, you're more likely to actually positively reinforce yourself to, it's just like, giving yourself like, come on, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it kind of thing. So I definitely made note of that one. And then the next one right after that was forgetting the past. And, that is completely so true that you just, especially in this, type of soaring event and soaring pilots, we just, the past is 5 seconds after, it just keeps the past. I mean, it's just, we're always moving forward, and you got to just keep on forgetting the past. I like that a lot.
I kind of like that too. When I teach thermaling to my students, I try to just voice out loud, okay, we're on the north side of the circle, we're getting 4 knots. Okay, now we're on the east side of the circle, we're getting 2 knots. So that otherwise they just can kind of get staring ahead and not really thinking, and it kind of forces you to think out loud and hear what you're doing, and then you can kind of act on it. But I like the idea of the saying what your plan is out loud too. Okay, I think I'm gonna do this, and then do that, and then kind of, yeah.
Well, Bill, and thanks for joining the group here. There are actually more areas that I do that in. In fact, I preface any flight with a new co-pilot by saying, we're going to be up in the air for 6 to 9 hours. I can talk that entire time. And I get it if you don't want me to be talking, because, I can think of some unnamed girlfriends in the past who talk too much. And I finally said to her, can you stop talking? I'm just overloaded, I get that. So, it's okay to say that. When I take off and I'm rolling down the runway, I tell my co-pilots this ahead of time. I said, I'm going to be saying what I'm going to do in case the rope breaks right then. So I say forward, 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 over the wires, left, left. Okay, we can make it back. And so that's on takeoff. And Bill, to your point, when you're thermaling, I say, okay, no, it's stronger over to the northwest. We're going to correct now, and that way. Soaring is tough enough, to be able to articulate and was a challenge to myself like 10 years ago. I said, you got to talk to yourself while you're thermaling. If you can say, okay, it's to the northwest. Okay, it's over there, compensate a little bit to the northwest. Okay, yeah. Okay, good. You come around. Okay, yeah, no. Okay, get away from the sink over there. Yeah, that seems to be bad over on the southwest side. That is tough to keep in your head, because you have to be absolutely oriented to which way, north and south are. If you can do that, that's a pretty high threshold. I've not seen anyone else in the cockpit do that, but if you can do that, that means you have a grip, and it's easy for us in Williams, right? Because that Mendocino Ridge is north-south, so that's kind of easy, and you can see I-5 north-south. But if you can do that, then that's a way to help, show yourself that you got a really good grip on what's going on, where things are, where are you going, where is the lift coming from, which way is the wind coming from. It's high workload, no doubt about it.
It is. It's hard to get them to actually vocalize that.
It is
I
tough.
try to set a good example for just to help the thinking, instead of I'm just going to go around in circles and hold on and hope things work out kind of thing, and
I'm reading a couple of questions here, comments from Reed Campbell. Which glider training overseas teaches mountain flying? If anybody knows, or Kempton,
Yeah, so I will escape from this here. Will I escape from this? Let's go take a quick look at that.
Your tabs look like Walt's tabs.
Oh, can you see? Can you all see my screen still?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay.
CNVV.net.
Okay, so this is the CNVV. It's French for Centre du National de Vol de Vele. Sorry, my French is not. But basically, was a government funded, and it probably still is government funded, location, and their goal was to produce some world championship winning pilots, and they did. And so it's like, I don't know, 2 square miles of this flat field in Provence. So it's fantastic to bring your family to. They can go out and tour the lavender fields or drink wine or whatever. It is absolutely fantastic. Well, let's do English here. And so there are dorms on the field. Let's see.
Nice.
There are dorms on the field. I stayed there for like 2 weeks, with John Good and Jim Norris. This is back in like 2002. And then their training is, let's see, the technical training. So basically, they just run you along the ridges. What is this? Yeah, they run you along the ridges, and it would be your lead pilot, and one of you. They usually have packs of 3. One of you is in the cockpit, like with a Janus, or these days they have duos. And then the other 3 of you are each in a single seater, like a 27 or 28 or a Discus 2. But your job is to stay within a mile of the lead pilot. And they basically run you along these ridges, pull the dive brakes out. Okay, we're going to go down, below the ridge. This is how you work, the canyons to be able to get out of there. Obviously, watch your speed. Where's the land out place, all that kind of stuff. CNVV.net. It is just fantastic. And it will up your game, better in the shortest amount of time versus anything. It is just, they're amazing. Okay.
Walt Rogers, I wish I would have done that 15, 25 years ago. I think it's a great aid in upping your skill level.
This has made, I keep coming back to this. This is the best dollar you will ever spend in your soaring career, not on equipment, not on tows. It's going to this place for a week. It will just up your game so much. It's just, it's amazing, especially here in the West, because you have to deal with, ridges and mountains and things like that. Any other questions or comments?
Well, there was a comment from John Chapman. He just was acknowledging your great photos, and he's asking if those are all your photos.
They are, or of my co-pilots.
Co-pilots, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, actually, this one is from. Oh yeah, no, I took that one too. So
cool.
Yeah, I try to use my photographs both to illustrate the point, but also just because, as we know, there can just be some incredibly spectacular views that no other, people who aren't glider pilots see, like your background, Bill. I mean, that's a fantastic background.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill posts. Yeah, I love Bill's posts. He's got some great photos from altitude for sure. But again, I'm kind of back to that training in ridges and high mountain. I mean, I will just say that one thing that really clinched me to know that I was got to learn and go cross country was when I got an invitation from Jim Staniforth to go up to the Sierra. And I'd only been flying Southern California only. And, that flight from Inukarn up to the Whitney and back was like, holy cow, this is what I'm going to, I got to get my cross country under my wing so I can really do this kind of thing. And so I would say there is opportunity for us to hook up pilots to get some of that training if we can hook up with pilots that fly up to the Sierra. No? Walt,
Yeah.
somebody?
My only caveat for that is, I mean, because like when people fly in my ship, I don't expect them to thermal the thing because, the wing, the adversarial is so bad, it's
Yeah.
okay. But something like a duo, or even a K-21, for short distances is quite workable.
Yeah, that's why I was able to get in the joint owned ship, the duo discus with Walt and Jim and Kathy, and went up in the duo, and he actually let me thermal and fly it for quite a bit of the time. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Cool.
that's important to do.
Yeah.
This was Walt Rogers here. The problem is when we get the good summer weather, Jim and myself and Kathy, we all want to go do our own single play ships.
Right. Yep. Got
And
it.
so we have a
Understood.
conflict, and unless we had the ships rigged every day and just roll
Sure.
it out of the hangar and just go fly. But
Totally.
I don't spend that much time like that.
Right. Got it. Understood. Yeah. Okay. Will anybody else have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I just, it was Walt Rogers here, Whiskey X. When I did my Barron Hilton triangle, it was 965-kilometer triangle out of California City. I've been watching for this weather pattern for years and years. I think I flew this in 2008 or 2007. I can't remember exactly. I saw the day coming up about 3 days, 4 days ahead of time. And I was, Kempton, you especially can relate to this. I was so focused. I mean, okay, my God, this is the day, and I got there a day early and I filled the oxygen bottles and I tanked up the Discus B. Was it a disc? I think it was a Discus B I did it in. No, it was a Discus 2A. At any rate, I got everything ready to go. And I showed up the morning of the flight and it was great and it was going well. I actually talked to Harry Winstel flying up to Hilton Ranch with as I was on my second leg, which is where I ended up with the reward for completing it. It was ironic. So resiliency was one of your words, Kempton, in this flight. So the flight was from California City up to, I think, Mount Patterson, like 2/3 of the way to Minden, and then east, somewhere northeast of Tonopah, about 30 miles, 40 miles, and then back to Cal City. So off to the east, it was blue, and I had to make a long glide into the blue and then back to Tonopah. Okay, my low point was about, I don't know, 8,500 feet, 9,000 feet at Tonopah, and it was blue. And if ever there were a low point, that was it. But I go, okay, so I did a slow climb. I did a slow climb up there to about 11, 12, 13,000. And I saw a distant cumulus at based 18,000 feet to the southwest on my course line. It was off on the edge of the Owens Valley on the Inyo Mountains near that pass there between Malone Pine and White Mountain Peak. I forget the name of the pass. Anyway, if I could only make that cloud, and I just crawled my way back over some pretty unlandable terrain, but just kept stair-stepping my way up. And I had options. They were quite a ways away. Fish Lake Valley, basically. I was stair-stepping my way, and I could see that cloud if I can just make it. So the story, as you would expect, was I did make the cloud, and I did get to 18,000. And from there, it was a great run all the way back. into a final thermal over the Kennedy Meadows area at about 14,500, 15,000. And then just one long glide back to the start point was actually a mountain peak northwest of Cal City. I think it was Chuckwalla Mountain. And what a thrill it was to finish over that mountain and finish the triangle. But resiliency and patience, even when you get low, it's amazing how much distance you can make and time you can make up when things get good again.
Yeah.
That's my comment.
Great.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Walt. Good comment and good story of just toughing it out. And again, one of these days I'd like to also do a porch chat or just some other meetups where people tell their, how I survived my, low save and all those things. Well, Kempton, that was great. Very good presentation. Thank you so much. Always
bet.
appreciate your insights and just keep on doing what you're doing. You're really, big help and a big plus to those who are on the edge of trying to figure out how to go across country, and you're taking these folks out and showing them how to do it is just, I can't say enough about how you're helping those folks who are right on that point of trying to make the big leap. So keep on doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Let me say thanks to Kempton. I know you have a lot of you're probably in high demand for all the soaring chats and talks and stuff, and you seem to show up a lot, and really appreciate your experience. Everything from I first met you at Wave Camp, I don't know, however many years ago that was, and that was really great. The SSA now also has a cross-country instructor program that they've started. And anyone on the list that's a SSA instructor should try to connect with that. And so with that is a cross-country pilot's guide and cross-country instructor's guide as well, which kind of goes over just a lot of the material as far as putting it in one place and not just scattered all over the place. So it's kind of hard to find on ssa.org. I went to look for it the other day and couldn't find it, but I mean, I'm signed up and they gave me the manual and the plaque and stuff like that. But I know there is some effort to try to push that and really get something a little bit more organized. There's the what's it called, proving grounds or something that somebody trying to help out with. Let's make some little cross countries that guys can start out with all within gliding distance of home, and then expanding it out a little bit more and try to get a little local competition going and stuff.
Sure.
We haven't done that quite at Sky Sailing yet, but I got a couple that were okay, let's stretch it out, go from one side of the valley to the other. And that proving ground, I'd like to look into that. I keep hearing that being talked about in Soaring the Sky. So I think it makes sense. I just have to take a look into it, but it's definitely a good stepping stone idea. So cool.
Yeah, they're doing, Ben Mays and the instructors at Williams are doing that to a degree also with the cross country camps and all. So similar idea. Cool.
Okay, well, thanks again, Kempton. Thanks, folks, everybody, for joining in. I appreciate the folks who joined in tonight. And again, we'll see you either next season. And again, if you have ideas, reach out to me. I put in my email in the text there. And maybe I'll post my email on the IO groups websites too. So if you have any ideas and thoughts, please share them with me and reach out to me. So other than that, stay safe, fly safe, have fun, and go cross country. Thanks. See you guys.
Thanks.
Take care.